You are now watching the Conversations on Sinology podcast, where China's past and present meet global curiosity. Join us as we explore Chinese language, literature, history, culture, economy, and ideas that have shaped one of the world's oldest traditions and play a powerful role in shaping today's world. Presented by the Montenegrin Sinology Development Council.
Welcome to the Conversations on Sinology podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Jelena Ozgur. Jelena is my dear colleague from Belgrade Philological Faculty, where we first met during our studies on Chinese language and sinology in general at the famous Department of Asian Studies in Belgrade. After studying Chinese in Belgrade, Jelena spent a year in Beijing continuing her studies, then moved on to Hong Kong to work for a Russian company. In 2005, she relocated to Guangzhou, where she lived and worked for the next 10 years for a company headquartered in Istanbul. That decade, from 2005 to 2015, was a time of breathtaking change in Guangzhou. The city expanded in its infrastructure and metro system, its population grew rapidly, and it began transforming into a truly international metropolis. Jelena had a front row seat to all of this, and today she's here to share what it was like to live through that transformation. We'll talk about her first impressions, everyday life, how the city evolved, and what role events like the Canton Fair and the Asian Games played in shaping Guangzhou's identity, so to say. We'll also reflect on how these years shaped her personally and what lessons her experience offers for people considering opportunities in China today. Jelena now lives and works with a family in Houston, Texas, but today she'll take us back to her decade in Guangzhou. Jelena, you have lived in several very different places, and we're going to talk about it today. So, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jelena. I remember we were like 3 or 4 Jelenas in our group in Beijing when we were studying, in Belgrade when we were studying. It was a popular name in the 1970s. So yes, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this invite. It's my favorite topic, one of my favorite topics. You know, I'm always willing to talk about this very unique experience and life that I lived in Guangzhou and in China in general.
Yes, I think Jelena is still a very popular name, I would say, and I'm glad that you like this topic. And you started out in Belgrade, as we both remember, continue your studies in Beijing, and then moved to Hong Kong for work. How did that path eventually lead you to Guangzhou in 2005? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right. And now when we are just putting all of that in one sentence, it sounds very easy and simple. But let's put us back in the time without this technological development and without internet. I remember my first letters to my family back in 1996 from Beijing back to Serbia were actually written, by normal mail. So yes, I wanted to study something different. I always tell that, and didn't want to go to at that time very popular roads of studying maybe Italian or English or German. I wanted to learn also about East Asian cultures. That at the time, the only way to learn about these cultures was to study the language, as you said, in Philological University of Belgrade. So, and it was a special time, our studies with the 1996 Belgrade protest and everything that happened afterwards. And then 1999, it was again special time. We just ended the 3 days of NATO bombing to Serbia. And this was the time when I was getting my Chinese visa, just after the Chinese embassy was actually bombed. So I remember we were every weekend going to Belgrade in a hope that we will find the new location of the embassy at the time. And, to make this sad story very short, everything worked out. So 1996, 1999, I was in Beijing. I remember celebrating the new millennium. It was, from a very dark period of 1999. It was a very, very optimistic year of 2000. So after seeing Beijing and, in comparison to the Serbia at the time, it was a huge cultural shock. It was a huge cultural shock how one country stayed behind and got distracted, totally destroyed economically. And then on the other side, China was rapidly industrially. There was a huge industrial revolution. It was a huge economical growth in all segments of life. The middle class was getting richer in China, and was Beijing of that time was so vibrant, and there were so many opportunities for us foreigners. I remember coming to Beijing, and as I was studying Chinese at the time, I was at the same time teaching English, and I would teach kids in the kindergarten to postgrad students in some of top Beijing universities, which was awesome for a student from Serbia at that time. And then I got after staying 1 year in Beijing, I never wanted to go back. I wanted to be part of that life. I wanted to be part of that economical growth. I wanted to be a witness of everything that was happening at the time over there. So I stayed in Hong Kong, which was another, like somebody put you in time capsule and just deported you like 300 years later with their, extremely busy lifestyle, with the city infrastructure, with skyscrapers. Like Hong Kong was like 2002, 2003 when I was living there, was extremely developed. And again, lots of foreigners, lots of cultural events, also entertaining events for youngs. And then 2005, as a married woman and a mother of my first son, Danilo was born at that time, I moved to Guangzhou. So Guangzhou was it was like a roller coaster at the time, because each of these three Chinese cities, except sharing the Chinese middle ground, didn't have. They're really different as well. So from this very cosmopolitan Hong Kong at the time, we moved to a very, I would say, Cantonese local culture, Guangzhou. So, and not to mention that 10 years after living in Guangzhou, I then moved to Texas, where I'm talking to you today, which is a very different culture as well. So, all in all, it was we were never bored. I can promise you that.
Absolutely not. And while you were speaking, I just remembered how much every feeling that you had was exactly the same for me, as our stories are pretty much pretty similar. And I remember that every feeling that you have described was exactly the same in my case. And our generation really did experience a lot, some good events and some bad events, unfortunately. But uh, thank you for walking down the memory lane. It really means a lot to me, and to I'm sure to all the listeners from our generations and all the people that studied with us in Belgrade and then in China. So you arrive in a completely new city, warmer than Beijing, less cosmopolitan than Hong Kong. And I do remember that we once met in Hong Kong and we really had a great time. I had to mention that. What were those first days like? What stood out most to you? The people, the atmosphere, maybe even the food?
Yes,
Not even, especially the food.
of course. So I remember coming to Guangzhou. At the time, we were living in a district called Tianhe, which is like a city center of Guangzhou. And like a building next to us was maybe at the time the third tallest in the world or something like that. But my first 2 weeks in living in Guangzhou, which may be interesting for listeners today, were kind of like I was seeking for kind of very important things in a Serbian person life, which was coffee. That was not something that you could find at the time. And then bread, same. Cantonese
And cheese, I would say.
cheese, absolutely, absolutely. So I remember until the IKEA store was open, we couldn't actually buy utensils. Like we couldn't buy a set of 6 forks. We when when you're hungry in China, you learn to use chopsticks very fast. So that was not the problem, but it was just like day to day life was very different than Beijing and Hong Kong at the time. So Beijing, the food, famous for its jiaozi, dumplings, Beijing duck, and very heavy, very oily because it's north of China. So they also have wheat. Cantonese culture, Cantonese food culture was very, very different. And if you ever watch any of the American movies, they always go to a Chinese restaurant and always been served dim sum. So I remember when I first arrived to Beijing, I was expecting that there's going to be these dim sum breakfast places all around, which I couldn't find. But then, luckily, when I moved to Guangzhou, Guangzhou is famous for its dim sum culture. So if you are in Beijing, don't look for it. But when you are in Guangzhou, go for it. It's very light cuisine. It's very aromatic. It's very lots of what our people from Mediterranean area would like. Lots of fish and seafood products. So it was very different lifestyle. And while in Hong Kong at the time, it was very westernized. Of course, Hong Kong is a part of Cantonese, broader Cantonese culture, but at the time in Hong Kong, there were so many, all kinds of Western inspired or like straight Western, the fast food restaurants or just a regular restaurant. And I want to say because such a long British influence in Hong Kong, they already had some kind of like, even the local Cantonese cuisine got adopted some of the Western influence. For Guangzhou, it was not the case. Guangzhou was very, very raw Cantonese food, and Guangzhou was very, I want to say, a very isolated culture at the time. I remember, like, you would see a foreigner on the street at the time, and you would just stop and start talking. It's like your relative, it's your like, or a distant friend or a neighbor that you didn't saw for a long time. Because it was so rare at the time. The population of the foreigners in Guangzhou was not so large at the time. Cities, I remember when I was telling my friends that I'm going to Guangzhou, and everybody was saying like, hey, you couldn't even land Beijing or Shanghai. These are the only two places that people in Serbia at that time knew. And they were more international because of the embassies, because of their known universities, because of also the big international companies would move their people there. Guangzhou, it was not the case. And then maybe later on we will talk more about it. I think Guangzhou in the international streams, it became more known with its Canton Fair. And I think that even the viewers in our region will be nowadays, most of them even more familiar with the Guangzhou because most of the people went to Canton Fair and in order to do some business with China. So yes, it was Guangzhou at the time was definitely a city that was moving, on a move, in the transition. There were very very old parts of the city that were definitely getting rebuilt, reconstructed. And then on one side, you could see something like a 20, 30 years old building that were getting fallen apart, and they would be on their places, there will be a new buildings made in a matter of, I don't want to say weeks, but definitely a few months. And then there were those skyscrapers and the beautiful new stadiums that were just all of a sudden showing up in different parts of the city. So when I arrived to Guangzhou, it was definitely a very, very moving city.
So, thank you, Jelena. And I do remember that we actually stayed in touch during your time in Guangzhou, and I did ask certain questions about your daily life and everything. But we never got to chat this much about the specifics, about all the aspects of living in Guangzhou. So I'm very, very happy that you are in this episode and that we have the chance to talk about it. Your story definitely deserves to be heard. This is an amazing story. So once you got settled, what was daily life like for you? I'm curious, how did people get around back then? Where did you live? How easy was it to navigate the city, etc.?
Yes, I always say, just to get out from your apartment in China, it takes some time because you are like those skyscrapers. I would always live on the 15th, 20th, 25th floor. I lived in Guangzhou for 10 years. In those 10 years, I moved 5 times because the city was so fastly and robustly developing that in every 2, 3 years, there was another part of the city that just got built, and it was a place where the foreigners were moving. So me and my family, we were moving along. Back in the day, I was such a, it was a very happy occasion that I want to say within weeks after I moved to Guangzhou, I had a pleasure of meeting a very good friend of mine. This lady is today living in Spain. Her name is Branka Nešić. She's also our colleague from Beijing, from Belgrade University. She did study English. So, and then she kind of walked me through because I came in early 2000s and she was there since early 90s. So the foreigners, the first foreign, she was among those first foreigners actually who came to live in Guangzhou. But my story is like you're waking up, you're on the 25th floor of a building. Now you need to go downstairs, right? So you come to your elevator. Think about there are 20 or 30 apartments on one floor. So even you have multiple elevators, it may be a chance that like the first elevator comes, but it's full. And then you would wait a couple of more minutes for another elevator. And then you go downstairs. So you're looking for your car plates. At the time in time, we also did purchase a car. So you need to go like 2, 3 floors above the ground just to go down to your parking space. Then you need to walk, and it's like, I want to say maybe a couple of hundreds of meters to find your car space. Then you need to drive all the way through those mazes just to go outside. Once you're outside, you're on the daylight, but you're not outside of your building complex. So it still takes you like 2 to 3 minutes or maybe up to 5 minutes just to get out. So I would say, so now when I moved to Texas, nobody could understand how I appreciate. I live now in the house. It's on the ground, and just open the door and I'm outside. So it's an interesting story, to me, because it's just like how much of daily planning it's changed, and how just like getting out of your apartment, it takes you 15 minutes. That time, it was not like the countries that I live at the time, which was Serbia. It was not, I couldn't even imagine that. So at that time also, I want to make little comparison. Like when I was living in Guangzhou, it was mostly buses and metros. When I was living in Hong Kong, it was definitely lots of metros and a lot of ferries, because I was always living I was working on an island, and I would live on the continental side. And now in Guangzhou, it was all buses, because there were, and taxis, of course. It was very affordable, so we took a lot of taxis at the time, at the beginning. But I think I pulled those numbers because, of course, I couldn't remember them. It's the how just the metro lines, how they expanded in those just the period of 10 years that we lived there. Like I remember coming and it was inconvenient because maybe there were just 3 lines. And I want to say there were like around 15 lines or something when we left Guangzhou 10 years later. And like literally you would go anywhere in the city, around the city by metro. And if you're not in the rush hours, it was a very, very convenient way to commute from one place and avoid the traffic of the big city, definitely.
Yelena, you just brought so many memories back about life in China. It resonates pretty much with anyone who ever studied or worked or lived there. And you stayed quite a long time. You stayed in Guangzhou for 10 years. And that's really a long time for a city that changes as fast as a Chinese megacity. I remember how fast things are built in China. How did you see this city transform during the decade that you
And
lived
it
there?
was it was like on a day-to-day basis. I know it's in the last 30 years. I'm going back. I'm originally from a small place near Pančevo in Vojvodina. So from the Belgrade airport to Pančevo to then my Kačarevo, my village, it's always the same. I always take the same way, and it's always the same buildings, the same roads, the same trees. In Guangzhou, you could go 1 week and you thought that you knew the neighborhood. And then just a few weeks later, the neighborhood could be so changed. So they would first build those skyscrapers. Then those little green markets would show up. Then a lot of like street sellers would show up. Then what I was always so amazed with, and anywhere else in the world that I traveled and visited, like people will also plant little trees, baby trees, and then they would wait for them to grow. I especially remember around, I want to say it was 2010. It was when we had the Asian Olympic Games in Guangzhou. They would bring, I want to say like, I don't want to say a kilometer long, but like, definitely tens of meters long trees in those giant, giant, giant trucks. And then they would plant them. So when you see those streets, you would think that those streets always existed there, right? Because like it didn't represent a new neighborhood. It just looked like it was always there. And it just could show up in a matter of a week. And I always remember, like, Guangzhou is also a city of flowers. It's known for that because of the mild culture. It never gets cold, super cold in the winter. So it was always sunny and it was always green and there was lots of flowers all the time. And then they would just plant those flowers and like you would walk literally something that yesterday was a construction site and today was like this beautiful, beautiful new modern and then infrastructure. So they would build a little trains around the river banks and you could just take the train during the daytime. Very, very beautiful scenery. Then they built also a Guangzhou Tower. It's the tallest TV tower station. It's one of the landmarks of Guangzhou, and I want to say all Asia. So it was as I said at the beginning, it was just such a huge changes on a daily basis, and you just get to live with that. So and then you would also it also represented in the number of the foreigners that live there. I want to say it was very, very. We would see very few foreigners at the beginning. But then as we continue living there were more and more international people moving and families start to live there. Lots of Europeans, lots of Asians, Koreans and Japanese. So you would see also the representation of Korean and Japanese, which I really appreciate those cuisines as well. So something that was extremely, extremely Cantonese cuisine, all of a sudden you would see sushi places and you would see also Starbucks. So let's go
Yes.
back to the beginning of my story and me
Yeah.
not being able to find the coffee. And then coffee was on every single corner. I want to say that just recently, I want to say like a year or 2 years ago, there was a statistic published that today there are more Starbucks in China than in US, and like you could buy a croissant, which was unbelievable, just like few years ago. So yes, and then also the foreign communities, as I mentioned, like they on every 2 3 years they were just trying to catch up that new, most beautiful, newest, brightest living spaces. So we there was a lot of moving for us. So we really had, I would say, a pleasure to experience new neighborhoods on every 2 years.
Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for sharing this. It's such an interesting story. And you just mentioned something that I was about to ask you about the foreign community that you just spoke about. It was quite small when you first arrived, and you've seen it grow and change over the years. And uh, we could speak a little bit about the economy and industry. This is something that this is the most important point when you're talking about a city such as Guangzhou. It's one of China's most important industrial cities and commercial centers. I remember your stories from the period when you lived there. You talked a lot about it. I remember Guangzhou Port serves as an important economic and transport center for the River Delta region and Guangdong province. It is also a vital transport hub for industry located in the neighboring provinces such as Guangxi, Yunnan, and Guizhou, Sichuan, Hunan, Hubei, and Jiangxi. And this port of Guangzhou is experiencing an increase in cargo volume and ships calling in, which, according to Guangzhou Port Authority, is due to the economic activity exactly in Guangzhou and the surrounding hinterland. And from your perspective, living there, how visible was the economic growth and industrial change in everyday life?
Yes. So I would start with talking about uh, how that also reflected my life. So remember me, 2005. I'm also not only trying to buy the products for my household, but I'm also trying to buy a product to buy for myself, like shoes or clothes or beddings, or stuff for my kids. And it's very, very at the time local Chinese. And then you start to see those like mid-tier brands coming in. I mentioned IKEA. Then we have H&M, we have Zara. Then later on we had also Uniqlo. And then all of a sudden, there's one thing which, as a woman who loves shopping, I appreciate about Guangzhou a lot. It's also the popping of the shopping malls. Like there was absolutely no shopping malls when I arrived there. And then just a matter of like few years, you have not only the mid-tier brands, you also have the very luxury brands like Louis Vuitton and Chanel, Dior, all that. And it's the transformation. It's amazing, and but the people are still the same people, right? So those people who walk on those wet markets now just they're put in those beautiful, very modern and very upscale shopping malls. People were really trying to catch up with all that economical development. Some when I was getting ready for this interview, I also look at the numbers, and sometimes when you are in that environment, you may not even think about it by yourself. But like it was very interesting for me. Like 2005, when we moved there, Guangzhou was a city of 9 million people, right? And then 2015, it was almost like 12 million people. So in a span of 3 years you have 3 million people added. It's like a whole, I want to say, Belgrade today, right? Like I'm just trying to, put it in our something closer to our perspective. So you have like in 10 years, you have a city size of a Belgrade added. So who are those people who move? Like the foreigners, yes, but then also the Chinese people. Who are they? Who moved to Guangzhou? Who are those 3 million people? So definitely people from less developed areas who came because of the job opportunities, like the white collar, you may say, but then also blue collars. Blue collars. Guangzhou is it's a capital of a Guangdong province. You're just talking about the port and whatnot. But back to the modern days. So you have a lot of blue collar workers, the migrant workers who came to Guangzhou to work because as the middle class all around the world was expanding and as all our economies were doing better, there was more and more demand for the products, and a lot of industries, including U.S. industry, were closing doors on their factories. I think the same thing happened in Europe as well. And China just took advantage of the moment, and with their very hard work, they grab a piece of that pie, and the migrant workers who came to Guangzhou, they start working in the factories. Guangzhou industry, yes, but it's not a heavy industry like in the north. Like south is more known for their soft industries. So you have home appliances, you have all kinds of electronics. All are, that nobody goes without their phones or iPhones today. So the close in the Guangzhou area, Shenzhen, biggest iPhone factories. But then all the fashion products are produced in Guangzhou area as well. And I was so lucky at the time to be part of that culture. I was of that. I was part of footwear industry for 20 years of my life, the footwear factories. So it was the time of very heavy expansion of all these fashion industries, textile, footwear, everything about leather, bags, belts. And I remember at the time I was working and how I was seeing those changes on a day-to-day basis. Like I would work with a Chinese exporting company, and there would be a sales. It's usually a woman, and she would be a sales representative, and we would work with her with 2-3. We like she would be responsible for my account, and I would be working with her for 2-3 years. All of a sudden, after 2-3 years, I would receive a phone call that she reached a peak of her career in that exporting company, and she was going on her own. And she would be inviting me to see her collection because now she had relationship with this factory. When you're working in China, factories are just they're mainly focused on the production part, and trading companies are actually the ones that you're working with because you're giving them the artworks and the designs, and then they're manufacturing in those factories. So I will start to visit this, this is not one case, but multiple cases. I would start visiting this lady, and I would come there. She would have just like 1 or 2 cubicles. There would be a little computer there, and she would have like 3 pieces of shoes, and she was trying to sell these shoes to me. And then next year I would come, and then there were like 2-3 people working for her, and she already had like 4 or 5 cubicles. Kid you not, 5 years later, I would come and that lady would hold the whole floor of that building. She would have, if not thousands and hundreds of different styles. She would be on top of everything. She would be traveling to Europe, to Italy, to France to get the new styles, new designs, new developments, new trends every year. So it was, and then, I was still working for the same company. I was like, because we were growing my kids outside, like just a nucleus family, like no extended family, just me, my husband, and so we put a lot of our time just trying to create those relationships that my kids may miss And I always was really excited for these ladies, and excited about their entrepreneurial skills, and just that uh, consistency, persistency, and how much they put so much work. All that I first hand saw it, that really there's a massive work, massive dedication. Like they would work on Saturdays, Sundays. They would work after hours. Like yes, they were in the right time at the right place, but they also applied themselves. They were not shy to put an extra work, to give themselves 100%, to gain the opportunity that the moment was giving to them.
They have put in the work, just like you did.